Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Constitutional Considerations here on Tactical Review. I am your host, Blair, and I'm joined once again by Elias of the Liberty Review podcast. Elias, welcome and good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, has your week been as crazy as my week has been?
Probably.
All right, well, I do...
It's always the short weeks that throw you off.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of short weeks, which it was preceded by obviously a long weekend, I do want to apologize to my wonderful viewers for getting most of the way through Memorial Day before realizing that I had not recorded and uploaded a video for you fine folks. So, yeah, that was just, I just was having a good weekend and got lazy, so it is what it is. I hope you guys all enjoyed your long weekend as well. I see that we have 4 viewers watching, but nobody's talking yet. So, and I realize that, well, I don't know if it's beautiful everywhere else, but it turned into a beautiful day here in north central Indiana on a day that we were forecasted for a load of rain. So that was nice. Anyway, oh yay, I see the spinny circle on the preview as well. That's always fantastic. Thank you, YouTube.
Oh, we're starting that already. We haven't even said anything yet.
Right, we haven't said the T word or the G word or, well, any of the other words that they hate, which is most of them that we say.
All right, most of them.
Poor conservative in the house, welcome, sir. Before we really get rolling, though, I do want to remind everybody that we still have a few days left for you guys to get signed up for the Stop the Bleed giveaway that I'm doing, where you have an opportunity to win a North American Rescue Cat Gen 7 tourniquet. That link is down below in the description. And while you are down there, North American Rescue is also offering 25% off of all community preparedness items with the promo code May25, and there is a link to those items in the description as well. And this is really neat. This my software says we're connected at like 4 megabit per second, and that's not fast enough for YouTube, so that's fantastic.
There you go.
Alrighty.
The joys of live stream.
Oh, yes. Okay, well, let's start digging in, and worst case scenario, we have to upload the locally recorded copy later. And we will start, let's see, do we start down under or up over? What do you think? Let's.
Oh, I mean, they're pretty much the same.
Right? Well, let's start with I don't know which order. I've got a couple of articles.
Let's start with down under, because that's going to show you what up above is going to become.
Where we're going. Hey, food for you. How you doing, man? Yeah, let's start with down in New Zealand. Brastard762, welcome, my friend. But we are going to start down under in New Zealand. And as you folks assuredly know by now, in an overreaction, because there's no reaction like an overreaction, to the Christchurch shooting, the Prime Minister of New Zealand has enacted a wide-reaching gun confiscation. And basically, if you will read through the link that we just dropped for you guys, you can take a look for yourself that New Zealand is seeing unprecedented numbers of, gun crime. I mean, it's a crime, and the bad guy happens to have a gun. And of course, the good guy doesn't have a gun because, well, those are illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, anybody with a couple of brain cells right next door to each other and a little bit of common sense and a very cursory knowledge of history could have told everybody that this is what would happen. And yet we know that the anti-gun folks in the crowd are going to plug their ears and say la 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 and push for even further reaching gun control. I don't know. I'm just, to me, this is like saying, well, this water in this bottle is wet. It's not a non-story, because these New Zealanders who are the victims of these crimes are absolutely unable to defend themselves against a lethal threat.
Right.
But it feels like a non-story by virtue of the fact that it's so obvious to even a casual observer. Used to be able to own anti-aircraft guns in New Zealand. Well, see, the problem is...
See, now that would be fun.
The problem, Brastard, is that everything had to be registered. And obviously, once again, we understand that registration historically precedes confiscation, whether it's by a week or by a decade or by 50 years. Once a government has that list, that set in stone list, which is why most of us don't like the 4473s that we have to fill out in the first place.
Right.
They understood back in the 80s that and that's why it was a plot point in Red Dawn. Just go down to the sporting goods store and get the 4473s. Anyway, it's just, it's definitely sad for those people who are being victimized. And honestly, they're having pretty severe mass non-compliance. Because it looks like, hang on, they think there's it was out of like just over 200,000 firearms that had found their way on the prohibited list. I think only 50,000 were turned in, or something of that matter. And I must not have kept the link open with that information. Easier to get a legal full auto in Pakistan than in the U.S. Isn't Khyber Pass in Pakistan? Because I know I'm always seeing really interesting firearms coming out of that part of the world. So,
well, I mean, it's not like they really care about what their government says anyway. Right. So,
hey, I see Brownies has come into the chat, and Warsaw Patriot. Warsaw, you say that. But I think given time, they've absolutely, look at what happened with bump stocks. So, folks with common sense, sheriff's deputies and whatnot that I've spoken to, yeah, they understand that going to try to forcibly take somebody's firearms is a good way to catch lead, a few dozen to a few hundred grains at a time. But there are those who would very willingly pull on the jackboots and go.
Oh yeah, I think a lot more people than we want to give credit to are going to end up doing that.
Yeah.
I think a lot more people are just going to go ahead and hand them over.
Well, and then the flip side is, it only takes a few to be more than willing, and a few who will go along with because it's the path of least resistance, and a few who are unwilling to give up their job for it. That's all it's going to take for law enforcement to start confiscating. So,
because when push comes to shove, America overall has a very comfortable life.
That's true.
And most people aren't willing to go through what's going to happen, whether you're talking about jail time or you're talking about an actual, gun battle. Most people are not willing to actually go through that. So,
absolutely,
the more comfortable thing to do will be to hand them over and then just go, oh, well, and then complain about it on Facebook. And that'll be it.
Right. I saw A-Dubs in the chat and George Washington back with us. Welcome. And, okay, so with us talking about New Zealand as a cautionary tale, now we will head up north to Canada. And this first story here from Bearing Arms, they're a weapons instructor up in Canada said it would make more sense for the Liberal government to bring in knife control than gun control. It would be more logical for the Liberals to have knife control where every man, woman, and child would have to take an 8-hour course, pass a practical and written test, 80%, and then buy a license to be permitted to handle and buy knives. But added, this would be as stupid as gun control. And see, he was saying this out of frustration and wanting to point out the stupidity thereof. But if we look across the pond, they're actually pushing to do such things over in England. So,
yep.
Yeah, and where Tony Keane of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, actually in what seems to be a rarity, it's rare enough in the United States that it really makes headlines when people like Beto O'Rourke actually admit the end game. And Tony Keane actually said, the government has finally moved to ban military-style assault rifles. Great, so let's go to the next step, a complete and comprehensive ban on the sale and ownership of all handguns. So, that's the thing, is I've had very left-leaning or anti-gun. Once again, it's not just on the left. There are anti-gunners on the right. At the man on the street level, they seem to be fewer and further between, in my observation, than those on the left side of the aisle. But especially as you go up the political hierarchy, you see them more and more, because further up the ladder, they just want more power. Anyway, at the, on the street level, I continually see people say, well, we don't want to take all your guns, but nobody needs an AR-15. It's fine that you have guns for hunting, but nobody needs blah, blah, blah. The fact of the matter is that the end game, as far as the government is concerned, is always complete disarmament. Oh, wow. The chat is flying by. Boating accidents? Yep, we can have boating accidents.
We've already established that we're not good boaters.
Correct. Gun rights shouldn't be a political topic, period. That's true. I mean, no more than I have, well, any of the Bill of Rights, any life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And how do we guarantee
There's a lot of
that?
things that shouldn't be political issues. Yeah, let's just leave it at that. There's a lot of things that shouldn't be political issues, but that's the reason why they are political issues. Because those are the things that are so important to people, and so they're easily manipulated for politics.
Yeah, let's see. Beto needs removed. Yeah, well, he definitely.
Like I said in the chat, Beto committed political suicide.
He did, and
he's already done.
And I don't understand how it didn't equate to political suicide by proxy when Biden sat down in that restaurant. The restaurant with Beto, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna make him my gun confiscation czar, my gun control czar, or whatever it was he said. Of course,
Because Biden's the chosen one by the party.
Biden's brain is a squirrel filling out a Mad Libs, but whatever.
Right. That's why he's the chosen one. The man's, if he doesn't have dementia, he's bordering on it, and he's being manipulated. That's my opinion. I think he's being manipulated by the DNC. But anyway.
How about we stop joining military and law enforcement? Yeah. Oh yeah, we've talked about that a lot, Warsaw, and I'm trying to remember my outline for the evening. We're going to talk a little bit about militaristic police forces again. We won't devote quite as much time as we did here several weeks back, but and yeah, Elias, that was you, yeah. And we have friends who are on the left side of the aisle who, yeah, they're very pro-gun. So,
yep, they're pro-gun, they're pro-rifle. I mean, they are more for gun control than we are, maybe, but
right.
They are definitely, they would not be too happy if somebody tried taking their guns either.
And Warsaw, you're talking about how an AR-15 is really, it is an upscaled 22. Out of a 16 to 20 inch barrel, it is considerably more devastating on target than a 22. But when you see these people build these like 8-inch AR 5.56 AR-15 pistols, those things are just a flashbang. Like when you look at the ballistics data, it's really a very heavy, kind of a plus P 22 long rifle. Because a lot of times you end up with a 55 grain projectile only doing like maybe 1,600 feet per second. And if you look at your typical 22 out of a 16-inch barrel, you're sending like a 40 grain projectile at 1,200, 1,300 feet per second. So anyway, anyhow, cops will enforce that level of tyranny with 2A infringement. Katrina is a prime example. Yeah. Yeah, and we've seen, we talked just a couple weeks ago about Greg Anderson and him stepping up and saying, you guys, just because you're in a uniform doesn't mean you switch off your brain. Use some discretion, and you don't have to enforce this tyrannical bullcrap. And in the last 2 weeks...
But again, the problem is most people will.
It's the path of least resistance. And unfortunately...
Yeah, and just like, we have these...
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Sorry. I was saying, just like a lot of people have this fantasy that if the government were to say something like, okay, we're taking them all, or anything like that, a lot of people have this fantasy that the National Guard and the military aren't going to go along with it. No, they're going to go along with it. They're absolutely going to go along with it. I mean, you'll have a couple outliers here and there might be a couple states where the governor has got enough influence to keep the National Guard on his side. They're going to go for it. Right.
And part of it's going to depend on, individuals and where they grew up and what their background was. But actually, I was talking to my brother-in-law who served a couple tours in Iraq back in the early aughts. And he was saying that one of the guys that he served with was actually very, very liberal, very against the global war on terror. Actually got their whole unit in trouble for talking crap about, well, we shouldn't even be here, to a reporter.
Yep.
While in uniform, while in country. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So
not a smart move on his part.
No.
But
they got in a little bit.
Oh yeah, there's lots of liberals. I mean, I worked with several guys. Yeah, I worked with several liberals when I was in there. Several people who, yeah.
Yeah. Main problem is decades of corruption. I would agree with that, and we've let that. And like Elias said, it's we live a comfortable life, and so if we have to choose between discomfort or well, too many of us will give up essential liberty for temporary security. And just
it's the same thing that, I mean, if you go back and look at history, that's when it happened. go back and look at Rome, as far back as Rome, even further. If the people are fed and happy, then the government can pretty much destroy the entire country around them. They don't care.
Absolutely. All right, what's going on here, computer? Okay, well, back within the borders of our great nation, and no surprise, coming as no surprise to anybody, once again, with a couple of brain cells, we see the reason that the NICS system has been backed up for the last 8 to 12 weeks, as we see in places like Cincinnati, homicides up 115% from January to May. Aggravated assaults up in Cincinnati. Baltimore, categories of, or some categories of violent crime are down, but homicides are up for the 6th straight year. Wait, Baltimore has really strong gun control, don't they? Because I actually remember my wife talking about wanting to go to Baltimore this summer, and I looked at their gun laws, and they were terrible. So they can't have gun crime, right?
Fake news. Fake news. It's also the same thing in Denver. You know, they have the assault weapon bans.
Right. They have a municipal assault weapons ban. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in case you guys haven't figured it out yet, you are your own first responder. And I think I'm preaching to the choir in this group. I'm fairly sure I am. But hey, Pale Horse, welcome. And yes, murder's against the law. So I don't know why they're so worried about banning guns. Just make murder illegal and it'll be fine.
It worked for the drug.
Absolutely. No, you know what frightens me? And, you know, just thinking like 1984-esque, the way that they've ended up kind of state by state, the conclusion that they're giving to the war on drugs is to make it legal and tax it for state income. So are they eventually going to, you know, make murder legal and tax it like you have to get a license?
Don't give them ideas.
And that's probably the least disgusting thought that went through my mind on what the government might do to make money with things that are currently illegal. I will let you guys fill in the rest of those blanks.
Oh, it'll get worse, don't worry.
Oh, yeah. Warsaw, tired of living in fear. You know, and that's the thing. I mean, obviously, those of us who decide that we want to take advantage of a platform like this and reach out to other fellow patriots, we kind of put governmental crosshairs on our back, if you will. Of course, I say that in the last few NICS checks that I've gone through in like 10 minutes, so maybe I don't have as much of a crosshair as I might think. But anyway, aside from that, I think the best policy is just live and let live, be prepared, and yeah, I always advocate against living in fear, live in a state of preparedness. But yeah, definitely, we are not descended from fearful men. So, and now a couple of stories that I'm going to kind of let Elias take the lead on, given his status as a veteran. The first one is highlighted, or it was precipitated by a double homicide at a veterans cemetery in Delaware. Go ahead, Elias. I mean, walk us through why weren't these people in a position to defend themselves?
First first of all, you're lying. There was no murder in a VA cemetery. The reason I know that is that VA cemeteries, like all VA property, is a gun-free zone.
Oh yeah, so you can't.
So there's no way there could have been a gun in a gun-free zone.
Absolutely.
Now, in all reality, yeah, there was a elderly couple that was killed in a gun-free zone. The all VA property is gun-free, and that's actually one of the things that's I've been considering reaching out to congressmen and senators about. I carry my weapon all the time. There are times I need to go to the VA hospital, so at that point, I've got to decide commit a federal felony, or do I leave it at home for the entire day? And that's not even to mention that if something happens in the middle of the day where for some reason I would need to go, well, at that point, what am I supposed to do? It's not that you can't carry it inside, it's that you're not allowed with it on the property, period. If VA police catch you, you can be arrested for it. Somebody still hasn't figured out that gun-free zones don't do anything.
Right. Well, in a not exactly related, but conceptually related story, what was the date on that, Elias? Last Thursday, there was a shooting at the U.S. Naval Base in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Yep. Yeah, somebody came up to the base. I believe it was he? I can't remember if it was Syrian, I think. But he came into the base, shot the gate guard, and drove through. She was wearing plates, stopped the bullet. I mean, knocked the wind out of her, but stopped the bullets. And she was able to at least kind of roll over and hit the alarm button. And he was neutralized within a few minutes. Didn't take too long for them to take care of that problem. But, that's another place where it's a gun-free zone, except for, very limited amount. While the DOD back in 2016 opened up the doors for allowing local commanders and branches to decide whether or not carrying concealed will be permitted. It's my understanding that the Navy has a blanket thing that no, it's not allowed at all on any naval installation.
Now
carrying concealed is not permitted.
I thought that there was changes happening to that policy after the Pensacola shooting. Why, or is that only where Marine personnel?
No, I think the DoD tried to kind of get it. Yeah, the DoD kind of tried to push it more, but from what I understand, Navy, at least when I looked earlier today, according to the Naval JAG, it's still not permitted on any naval installation.
Okay, and like I said,
so as a DoD directives allow it now, but the branches are still allowed to decide.
Okay, and see, this is, this is where it goes back to the statists like how confusing all of this is. Am I legal? Am I not legal? Let's go back to the VA property situation, because even in many states, and it's my understanding it's this way in Indiana, I know it was this way in Tennessee, obviously school properties are gun-free zones. But as long as you were in your vehicle or you left your firearm secured in your vehicle was kind of like an embassy of your, the property that the vehicle sits on is school property, but the vehicle itself is your property, and as long as the firearm stays secured in there, everything's copacetic. So obviously, VA properties don't work that way. And,
right. Because they're federal property, yeah.
And there's so many rules, there's so many regulations, it's fine here, it's not fine here, this side of the sidewalk, it's fine. You step off the sidewalk, you're in a different jurisdiction, and it's not fine. It's asinine. We need federal preemption laws based on just the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed, and then that should just blow away everything else.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just like kind of what they were trying to push, and it went nowhere fast. The idea of the kind of the same way driver's license works, marriages work, all that. that if you got one in one state, that's it. It works for the rest of the states, and that's within Congress's authority. By the Constitution, Congress has the authority to say, if Indiana gives me a permit, it doesn't matter what the requirements were, because every state can have its own requirements. But as soon as I got that permit, I can use that permit anywhere in the country.
And
and it's sad that they did that for law enforcement, but they haven't done it for regular non-law enforcement yet. And
right.
That's definitely one of those bills that needs to get dealt with.
Well, and the worst part about that is I seem to remember 4 years ago that was one of somebody's major campaign points. Not mentioning any names, but he is known in some parts of the firearms community as the Orange Infringer.
Yeah, well.
All right, and then one last.
That's all right. They'll all infringe it, both sides nowadays.
Absolutely, we'll keep coming back to that. And
Yep.
Okay, now here's one. It's a hard subject for me personally, for probably a lot of us who would ever come across this, because I think all of us have had our lives touched by suicide. But just, this is kind of a thought piece. This isn't necessarily like breaking news from the last week like we usually would deal with. But just studies. Let me back up and regroup my train of thought, because every time there's an infringement put forth, it's always bandied about as for the greater good. Do it for the children. Do it for this group. Do it for, and as one thing is proven false, either the data is just ignored, which is typical, or it is massaged, or they just switch to something different entirely. And one of the major rallying cries, in fact, we've had presidential hopefuls within the last 6 months actually use suicide prevention and gun control together as a rallying cry. And what we see, there's actually a graph in this article that I linked that unfortunately I would have blown it up and put it on screen, but it's not clickable and stealable. So, but now that we've had some 20 years of strict gun control to research violent crime rates and suicide rates and things in Australia, what they have found is that, yes, obviously with fewer guns there are fewer suicides using guns. However, the total suicide rate has been largely unchanged due to the substitutive quality of a suicidal individual.
Well, and that's the thing. There's plenty of ways to do it. If you want to, there are plenty of ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's indicative more on our culture than on firearms.
Right, and I've got to say, my life has been rocked by, at this point, probably a half a dozen suicides, and only one of them used a firearm, and the others all used a rope. So,
Yep. Yeah, same here. And I don't know how, I can't recall how many, but yeah, most of them use like rope or other methods.
And obviously this is not a how-to stream on causing yourself harm, and we don't want...
No, but the fact is that they're going to find a way.
Absolutely.
And so thinking that restricting firearms is not... that it's going to do anything is an excuse at best, ignorance at worst. Or plain stupidity, I should say, at worst.
Or maliciousness to just infringe on other rights behind a virtue signaling for something else. Okay, that's enough rough news for a minute. We will come back to other things that should make your blood absolutely boil. There's definitely a few. Our major story for the night, I actually had to stop reading the article a couple of times because my heart rate was increasing and my blood pressure was going up. So, but first, let's look at some Pro 2A successes around the country, and we will start with last week. The Oklahoma legislature became the first state to put a law on the books completely forbidding red flag laws or the enforcement of the same. So they are taking up the banner of states' rights and have actually put it on the books that not only will they not do any state level red flag laws, but they will also refuse to enforce any federal level red flag laws. So, and without reading the bill that was put forth and signed into law, I don't know, hopefully it has verbiage in there that they will arrest any federal officers attempting to serve those.
Hey, I would love that. Wyoming, so I don't know if you know, Wyoming a couple of years ago was passing a law, and I can't recall if it ever got passed, but this was during the Obama administration when they were talking about banning the manufacture of assault rifles. And Wyoming actually passed a law saying that that was not going to abide, that any federal officer found trying to enforce a federal law against any gun manufacturer within the state of Wyoming would be subject to arrest by sheriffs. So it wasn't even going to be a thing of we're not going to do it, but they actually in Wyoming had the law saying that the local sheriff would be arresting any federal agents.
And that's fantastic. That goes back to, and whether or not anybody would actually stand on that, but that goes back to we need within the peacekeeper or the law enforcement community, whatever you call it, we need the ones who would claim to be constitutionalists to put their money where their mouth is and be willing to actually stand up against those who would represent tyranny. Vanessa Kitty, welcome. Thanks for joining. We actually just got done talking about VA properties, which I know are places that you have to visit with some frequency. So, all right, good news, potentially good news, coming out of Louisiana. The House, the Louisiana, there's a House of Representatives, House of whatever they call that branch of their legislature, has put through a bill to the state Senate which will allow individuals to carry guns at church without first getting permission from the clergy. So, which the last time I looked, that was how Michigan's laws were worded the last I looked, was that you were allowed to carry in a place of worship with permission, as opposed to...
That's where I prefer that one. I think that the clergy should have approval on there, just like in businesses. I'm perfectly fine with businesses saying we don't want you to have guns in here.
See, and this is where I'm fine with them,
because that's private property.
I'm fine with them asking me to leave if they dislike it, but I'm not going to ask permission on the upfront. So, especially given the fact that...
But to me, the problem is, to me, the way it's worded is that if you have to have permission, okay, I can understand the whole asking forgiveness instead of permission, but the way it seems worded to me is that even if they don't want you there, you can just tell them, well, I don't really care what you want.
Now, see,
which I have a problem with that, because that's private property.
Right.
I don't think the state should say you're not allowed to at all, because that's, again, private property. But
yeah, and I'm not sure how this bill is actually worded. because, see, we had another one that we were going to look at, and I thought that it had something to do, it said specifically that it could still be constituted or considered trespassing. And I've read so many news stories that I don't remember.
Yeah, it does say that it doesn't change any of the criminal trespass laws.
So that being the case, then.
Okay, so it does allow churches to still tell people they know to be carrying it. Okay, which is I'm fine with.
Which is, once again, that's the way in Indiana. I've mentioned this before. With the exception, like schools and federal property and things like that, a gun-free sign carries no force of law in the state of Indiana. If the establishment personnel or owners see that you're carrying, they can, however, ask you to leave. And if you refuse, at that point, you are an armed trespasser. So you won't be in trouble for carrying a firearm. You'll just be in trouble because you're trespassing, and you are also armed while trespassing, which
I thought in Indiana it was regarded differently. I could have sworn in Indiana it was you can be you still have the trespassing, but I thought in Indiana if you wanted to make that hill the one you want to go to, you can still actually sue them for discrimination.
I believe you're right. So it's one of those, like,
just like asking somebody to leave because of the color of their skin, you can sue them for discrimination. I think Indiana law actually allows for civil relief.
I think you're right, but that said, that wouldn't be the hill that I wanted to die on, because I don't want to be standing there armed.
And
when somebody's saying this person's trespassing.
I definitely would. Yeah, and I definitely would, because that, to me, I was really aggravated. What was that, about 4 years ago when all the bakery stuff started up, and instead of just saying, oh, okay, we'll go to a different place, that's the way I feel. Is like, okay, if you don't want my money, fine. I'm sure there's plenty of people who do.
Right, and Warsaw Patriot, yes. Back in the Old West, there were certain towns where you would be disarmed by the sheriff at the town limits. And when you left, they would escort you to the town limits again and give you your firearms back, at the border of the town.
I'm perfectly fine with. I'm perfectly fine with, based on how the Constitution was originally written. I'm perfectly fine with that, because that's not the federal government. Congress is not making any law.
Right. Now, I would personally avoid said towns. Yeah,
exactly. You would just avoid those cities, which was the idea. And I mean, several states had their own freedom of, or not freedom, but their own version of the Second Amendment.
Right. So now here's the problem with that coming into 2020. That works in a town of a few hundred people, maybe. That doesn't work in a town of a few 100,000 or a few million.
Right. So, also, I mean, it is kind of a moot point, because the judiciary has kind of changed it to applying to everybody, and hopefully the Supreme Court will actually hear the case that is trying to get that is petitioning to be heard, where they're going to challenge the idea of may issue states. Yeah.
Now, thing is across the last decade there have been quite a few Pro 2A cases that have just been, that the Supreme Court has just refused to hear. So, but as a matter of fact, isn't there a suit against the Department of Justice about them treating the Second Amendment differently than they treat the First Amendment as far as cases heard? So,
I think the Department of Justice is the one that brought the suit, didn't they?
That may be what it is.
Or was it against the Department of Justice?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Maybe it is the Department of Justice against.
Because I could have sworn it was
Supreme Court.
I think it was somebody like petitioning another department to say, why are you treating these cases differently?
And Brastard, and that's exactly. I mean, the whole idea of concealed carry goes back to those gun-free towns, because once again, people understood that criminals are going to slip in outside of the normal routes into town where they won't be met by the local law enforcement posse, and they will still be armed. And
Yep.
and again, it's just logistically it won't work now, and we see that in places like Chicago that are they try that, and the guns still come in. So yeah.
Yep.
And speaking of places like Chicago, which are gun-free zones, but staying in the subject of Louisiana, Louisiana is also working on a preemption law that will unify their laws statewide. It's House Bill 140. So if you happen to live in Louisiana, you might want to reach out to your representatives and tell them that you would like more uniform gun laws across your state. It would prevent a local political subdivision's authority to enact certain ordinances or regulations involving firearms. Also in the link that I shared, you will see that West Virginia has signed Senate Bill 96 into law, which I believe is the bill that just reworded their preemption laws to also include knives, pepper spray, other weapons, other potential defensive tools. So
Good.
And now,
and I mean, preemption laws are good because we've seen, like in Michigan, where they were trying to kind of circumvent the governor a couple months back, or the government rather, a couple months back. Where because locals decide they're going to try to do their own thing.
yeah, and then that makes it to where you end up with an even worse situation. It's not just wondering if you are on federal land or, but then it's, okay, I have an Indiana carry permit and these are the rules in Indiana, and now I have to wonder if I go to South Bend if I have to keep different rules in mind. Here where I live,
Yep.
I can carry and go with my kids to the playground and be ready to protect them against terrible people and predators, but go up to South Bend and you're not allowed to carry in a park. What? Yeah, you don't, with preemption laws, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Once again, though, I feel like we have a national preemption law that says something about, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
They were only talking about muskets and cannons. They were only talking about muskets and cannons.
Allegedly. That's what they say. And that's the funny part is, as destructive as a cannon is, you can absolutely own a 3-pound cannon and keep it loaded with grape shot if you want. And we're worried about handguns and claymores and machine guns. I'm pretty sure you could wreak havoc with a few 3-pound guns. But what do I know?
Oh, yeah.
All right, now some bad news. In Virginia, in spite of the 95 or so counties that have declared themselves to be Second Amendment sanctuaries across Virginia, we do see other counties that are excited about how they are going to implement Lord Northam's gun control agenda. So, one of them being Loudoun County, which is a suburb of D.C., I believe. Is that right? Somebody? Can't scan the article fast enough.
Sure, we'll
I
go
like
with
it.
that.
We're gonna call it a suburb of D.C. And if somebody lives in Virginia, they can tell me I'm an idiot.
I don't even care where it is at this point. We're just going to call it a suburb. Doesn't matter where
Well,
it is. We're just going to call Virginia a
There
suburb
you
of
go.
Washington, D.C.
Like, I seriously, I don't understand how all of these lawmakers and how Governor Northam aren't looking at the popular response and saying, this is political suicide. I just...
That's assuming they care about the response.
Well, you'd think, though, that they want to have a chance at re-election. I feel like right now I could move to Virginia and run for governor on a platform of restoring the Second Amendment to its previous place in the state and just win on that. Like, I don't think I'd even have to talk about any other issue, and I think I could win on that. Maybe not, but...
I don't know. It's hard to tell. Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I mean, these guys won in the first place.
But then again, part of the problem is...
And here's the big thing. Undoing it will be harder than doing it in the first place. It's done now. I mean, a great example would be right after Trump took office, and one of his huge agendas was, let's undo Obamacare. Right. And it wasn't until he got there that he realized how ridiculously difficult it is to backtrack on legislation. So now that this is in place, it doesn't really matter who wins, because it's going to be difficult to backtrack on that legislation. Because you've got to get enough votes, and you have to get enough people that are actually enough legislators to actually undo, to mention all the kind of that cascading effect that it has. So I think once it's in, it becomes really hard to undo.
Oh, I mean,
and I think that's what you'll see. And so they don't care, even if he commits political suicide. To him, it doesn't matter, because what he wanted, got done.
And I absolutely
agree. And he knows it can't be undone easily.
And that's why anytime that I see something like that so-called ghost gun legislation that I dropped the action link for last week, that's why it's so important to make pains to fight that stuff, because it is so hard to get those rights back.
Yep. So. Exactly. Once they're gone, they're gone. It doesn't. I mean, unless it's a bill that has a sunset effect or whatever, like the ban in the '90s, it doesn't matter.
Right, and that's why
it's not going to get undone. So the thing is, you have to stop it from happening in the first. Look at Patriot Act.
And that's why the Democrats have been so vehement that that every time they push for another assault weapons ban, they make sure that this one won't have a sunset, because they realize that
exactly,
they didn't get what they wanted because it didn't get extended. And Randall,
I think what had happened was, I think what they were hoping with that back in the 90s was that when it came up and it was about to expire, I think that they were kind of betting on having more control of Congress to be able to get that passed easily, because the only reason it had that sunset was to get it passed. Mm-hmm. They gave the Republicans something in the bill and also put in a sunset, and they managed to grab over a couple of them and get it passed. I think what they were hoping for was that when it came up again, that they would actually have enough votes to push it through, and they just haven't ever since then. Even when they controlled the House and the Senate, they still didn't have enough to get it through. Which, to me, it kind of gives me a little bit of hope, because when they had the supermajority in the Senate, then they still couldn't get a ban. That's kind of at least a little bit of a silver lining, or a sliver of hope, rather.
Yeah. And Randall in Warsaw over here talking about the Tippmann Arms 9mm Gatling gun. Actually, so in the same vein as that, they actually make chassis for the Ruger 1022 that allow you to mount two 1022s with a cam that goes into the triggers, and since it's cranked by hand and it's two separate receivers, kind of lets you set up a dual barrel sort of Gatling gun with those. And honestly, I think because with a little bit of rigging, that could be shoulder portable or man portable, and I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a wall of lead coming out of a 22 long rifle or a 223 or anything, you know, 50 BMG. I just rather not have lead slung my way at several, you know, tens of hundreds or thousands of feet per second. So,
no.
So yeah, anything that is a mechanical uplink like that is fully legal to own. As a matter of fact, I think that I've seen mounts even that put AR-15s in them, and it's hand cranked, and for the time being, that's not considered a machine gun. Now, the second that you rig up your DeWalt drill to it, then it's a machine gun. And yeah, don't be trying to put a motor on those. They frown on that because then it legally changes from a Gatling gun to a minigun, and yeah, they frown upon that. So that said, I believe that we should be allowed to have a GAW 8 Avenger, you know, and the A10 to go around it. So, I mean, how pro 2A are you? I want a battleship. All right. Let's see which order to cover these next two. I think for our final few items, we are going to cover these in order of increasing rage that it creates inside my person. So,
well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, there's a few of these that I may become spitting mad. So let's start with my neighbors to the west and the tomfoolery that the Illinois legislatures are working on in relation to you guys' FOID cards, which feels like an infringement to me in the first place. Whatever. And so this concerns Illinois Senate Bill 1966, which is still waiting to be scheduled for a hearing in the Senate committee. So that seems good. Reach out, if you live in Illinois, reach out to your district senator and let them know that if Senate Bill 1966 comes up for a vote, you want them to vote no. And I'm just going to run down this bullet list. It will criminalize private transfers, punishable as a Class 4 felony. So I'm guessing that means that all transfers, you just have to go to an FFL, or be the only thing I'd think. Anyway, require the recipient of a firearm gifted by a family member to call into the state police within 60 days to run a background check on themselves, even though they already have to have a FOID card to receive said gift. So you have to pass a background check and pay for permission to own firearms. And then, Senate Bill 1966 would also allow for an indefinite delay on firearm transfers, as opposed to the 3-day delay if they don't hear back with a no transfer. It would mandate FOID applicants to submit fingerprints, including for renewals. It would increase FOID processing time from 1 calendar month to 30 business days, which obviously could span more than 6 weeks, depending on how said business days fall with holidays and whatnot. It would reduce the duration of FOID card validity from 10 years to 5, while doubling the application fee from $10 to $20. So that would mean across 10 years you would pay $40 for your right to bear arms instead of $10. would require FOID applicants to pay all fingerprinting costs and processing fees for the background check, which would total around $150 on top of the application fee. And, oh man, that really... Think about that. So you quadruple your cost across a decade just for the application fee, and then you'd be throwing like $300 of fingerprint and background check fees on top of that. Oh my gosh.
It's the idea is to make it so costly that no one's going to do it. So they've learned that the Supreme Court's not going to let them stop people completely from owning a firearm. Because that's the thing, for those who are not familiar with Illinois, this is not a permit to carry. This is a permit to be able to even own a firearm and to get ammo. That's it. This is for, even if you don't want to carry around, you just want it for at home and to, if you're out in the country shooting your backyard or go to a range. You can't even do any of that without even having this card. So this is just trying to get people not to even own firearms anymore.
Absolutely. It's the same concept.
And the idea is, they know that they can't forbid it, so let's just make it really difficult.
It's the same concept as what the NFA was in 1935. The idea was to make it so prohibitively expensive that regular citizens would not. And by and large, I'll tell you what, there's a reason that I don't have a can for every firearm I own. And that's what that $200 not going up in cost since 1935. And what's more is, as soon as you have NFA registered items, that also opens you up to a different level of the feds can come in at any time. Not to get too far off in the weeds, but I've been watching some podcasts with Kyle, aka FPS Russia, talking about his arrest and all of the crap surrounding that. And the search warrant they had was actually garbage. And if it weren't for the fact that he was a Class 7 SOT or firearm manufacturer, which put him, federally registered, they would have actually gotten the whole case thrown out. But because of all of the NFA registry crap, even though the search warrant wasn't valid, all they had to say in court was, we were just doing a checkup on NFA, location of NFA items, and boom, then they were there for regular routine checkup and happened to find drugs, a whole 1 ounce of marijuana, and then they found some text messages that he and his girlfriend had shared a joint, and so that makes him a distributor. And just a bunch of absolute garbage. Anyway, on to this Senate Bill 1966. We haven't even gotten through all the crap of it yet. Let's see. We last talked about fingerprint cost. It would prevent those with a revoked FOID card from transferring firearms to another FOID card holder in the same household. And also take away the right to self-defense from individuals due to the alleged actions of someone else in their house. So if, for instance, my wife and I were both FOID card holders, and she did something to lose her FOID card, well, let's be honest here, it would be me who did something that was displeasing to the crown. But anyway, regardless, all of those firearms would have to be confiscated from the house or transferred to somebody outside of the house because one of us had lost our FOID card. And related to that, would also require the owner of seized firearms to petition the court to have them transferred to a third party. Man, how many violations?
Who cares about due process?
How many violations of the Bill of Rights can we put in one state bill? So, and since we've determined that the Constitution or the the amendments apply to the states, how is this not just struck down as unconstitutional? I don't know. I actively avoid.
If somebody actually takes it to court.
I actively avoid going to Illinois. As a tourist, I kind of enjoy the occasional visit to Chicago, but it's just not worth putting all of my constitutional rights on hold to cross an arbitrary line on a map. It's just...
The only problem with Illinois is not being able to carry concealed. You can legally have it in your vehicle.
Oh, well, that's been updated.
If you are from out of state.
That's been updated since I last looked.
If you're from out of state, yeah. If you're from out of state, you're allowed to have it in your vehicle. However, if you leave your vehicle, you're supposed to have it locked up. But the car's not enough to lock. There's another lock because people never steal safes and open them.
What about a locking glove box? Is that considered a second level of locking?
I think so because it's a locked container.
Because I actually, those times that I have to exit my vehicle, and I do that anyway. If I'm in some place where I have been carrying and then I'm going someplace where I have to be disarmed on the property, and again, it's a felonious level issue, not just a moral issue. I either secure it in a locking glove box or I have a portable safe that is cabled to the vehicle and hidden.
Right.
Because, I fully understand a vehicle is not a holster and windows are insanely easy to smash. So, see, that's why that doesn't need to be a law. That's common sense.
Right, but that is there now. And I think it may have been they were running afoul of federal peaceable journey laws.
Gotcha.
Because if you are trying to say, I don't know why you would want to go to Iowa, but if you're trying to go to Iowa from Indiana, you would have, it's either you go through Illinois or you go down and around or you go up through Michigan and Wisconsin. Either way, it's going to be very
it's
inconvenient for you. So, peaceful journey laws were there for a reason. But yeah, from what I understand, now is as long as it stays in the vehicle and you're not supposed to have it in a holster on you at the time, fine, whatever. I don't know, anyway, it's uncomfortable. But yeah, you can travel through.
Gotcha, because the last time I looked, they were requiring non-Illinois permit holders to have the firearm stored separately from the magazine and ammunition, and it's been a while.
Yeah, I looked last year because I was in Illinois last year for something. So I wanted to kind of see what were the rules.
Oh. Sorry guys, I'm trying to catch up on the chat here too. Randall Hill found a video of the Freedom Defense dual AR Gatling gun. There you go. Enjoy. Mitch McConnell, we have to thank for the death of the Hearing Protection Act. Thanks, Mitch. Well, and we have whomever paid the individual in Virginia Beach to, use one silencer on two 1911s to commit a shooting in a gun-free zone to just prove how dangerous suppressors are. Majority of New Mexico has 2A sanctuary counties. Awesome. Brits more scared of an armed population in Ethiopia than their army? Absolutely. Once again, with Japan, there's that quote from World War II, would not attack mainland United States because there was a rifle behind every blade of grass.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and with all the news, the violence, or with all the laws, violence in Chicago is fake news, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, okay, now, this one. Did you have a chance to read this article that I sent you about the lawsuit against Academy Sports, Elias?
Yeah, I actually read it yesterday because I was getting some things together for another recording, and I came across that bit of
This
news, and the ridiculousness
the
behind it.
stupid burns. Okay, so on May 1st, so just here a few weeks back, attorney Craig Heiderman filed a lawsuit against Academy Sports, contending that they contributed to the unlawful death of Aaron Hampton. So you need a little bit of background here. Aaron Hampton was killed by his former roommate, Luis Perez. So first off, Perez is an illegal immigrant. So, yeah. It gets better. Perez is an illegal immigrant who was only still in the U.S. Because of an immigration sanctuary county. So there's that. There was another roommate killed, and then a woman named Sabrina Starr, and it was Starr's weapon that was used to kill the three of them. And she gave it to Perez willingly. I feel there was something else in here that was just ridiculous. But the lawsuit is being brought up against Academy because Perez obviously didn't buy the ammunition himself. He gave the money to Starr in front of the clerk, and Starr paid for the ammunition. As if there's not a dozen reasons why that might happen. I mean, of everything, that's like the least sketchy thing in the story.
Yeah, you want to hear something great though about this. This is going to be something where he's hoping Academy is going to settle. The attorney, this Craig Heidemann, according to his law firm biography, he is a avid firearms enthusiast and a competitive shooter, and he holds an FFL. In other words, this is not somebody who doesn't know anything about firearms. He knows about the industry. He knows how this all works, which means that what he's doing is this is like an ambulance chaser hoping for a settlement because Academy is not going to want to go to court.
And now wait, one thing I haven't seen here is he filing this suit on behalf of Hampton's family?
I'm going to guess that he made a phone call. Either they came to him or he made a phone call looking for a case. There's no way he knows that this is going to stand. So he's got to be hoping for a settlement. Because an attorney who is an FFL and is a competitive shooter knows that there's no background check. He knows that there's nothing illegal about what happened in that transaction. Which means the only reason he's doing it is for a big payout. And he's hoping to use that. And to me, that's somebody who shouldn't be allowed into any of these competitions anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
I think if he's doing NRA competitions or any competitions, they should do a lifetime ban on him at this point.
Either way.
Yeah, I couldn't believe when I read that part. I was like, wait.
Either
what?
way, this is going to potentially affect prices at Academy Sports, and I've made quite a few online ammunition purchases through Academy. I bought my EOTech through Academy. They tend to have really great prices on shooting sports stuff. And unlike other virtue signaling companies, they continue to carry shooting accessories and firearms and etc.
What worries me is not just the prices. What worries me is it giving traction to people who want background checks for ammo, as if that's somehow going to make a difference.
Well,
who want stricter regulations on ammo. That's what concerns me about that, is if he inadvertently or inadvertently, who knows, just because you have an FFL doesn't mean that you're a Pro 2A.
Well,
is that one way or the other it's going to end up having ripple effects.
I'm kind of hoping that the background check for ammunition gets struck down in the Ninth Circuit.
Yeah.
Because that's
I thought it was already upheld by the Ninth Circuit.
the...
I thought it was already upheld by the Ninth Circuit, or was that something else?
I'm trying to remember the order on that. Because there was that Freedom Day for ammo. And then it was upheld pending appeal, I think is what that is. And so there's still, it's not an all hope is lost thing. And I'm really hoping...
Maybe it was a stay. Maybe it was that they were trying to get an injunction, a temporary injunction.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay. Was that
That's what it was.
Okay.
And
okay, they wouldn't give them an
yeah,
injunction.
and me in legal terms, we barely live in the same world. So anyway, I'm really hoping that gets shut down in the Ninth Circuit because obviously, that's going to that's a big chunk of the country out west, and B, then that's going to set a precedent at least a circuit level that this is not a constitutional thing, and even the Ninth Circuit, as anti-gun as they are, didn't stand for this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that there are a couple conservative judges have been appointed recently. So hopefully,
and like I said, my understanding on that is that the judges who are kind of like on the appeal board, that rotates, and so it may work out that they might get an appeal board that are more pro 2A, and so
that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. So that was.
The sad part is that it has to come down to politics, and you have to hope that the right justices, instead of the justices just looking at the Constitution and saying it is this or that. Unfortunately, even in what is supposed to be the most apolitical branch of our government, it's still
political.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to talk just a few more minutes once again about the death or the incidents surrounding the death of Breonna Taylor at the hands of the Louisville Metro Police Department. And specifically, though, I want to focus in. I've read some articles now and that I just linked to you guys that had some more information than I had even last week, where I had a little bit more information. And a few comments by Kenneth Walker, which is, if you haven't caught any of our discussions on it or you haven't seen any of the news on it, he was Taylor's boyfriend who fired at the plainclothes intruders. Yeah, the police who didn't have body cams running and broke into their house. And there's a few. I actually want to kind of break this down now, based on some of these comments, into lessons for all of us as self-defenders. And so you scroll down here. I am trying to... So one of the officers, Mattingly, was hit in the femoral artery by the single shot that Walker fired. And I was disappointed when we first heard about this that it was, one person, one intruder hit and only in the leg. And so Walker actually commented, he said he was trying to shoot down and toward the ground. And he's quoted as saying, "I don't need to kill anybody if I can just get you out of here." So I want to start with that. guys, gals, if you are in a situation that warrants the use of deadly force in self-defense, then you fire for effect. In the eyes of the law, it is no different if you unholster a firearm and point it at a person than if you unholster a firearm and fire a warning shot, or if you unholster a firearm and you drill somebody in the chest or in the ocular T-box. In the eyes of the law, all three of those are a use of deadly force. So if you're not justified, if you're not in a position where you feel like you would be justified to drill somebody in the face, then you're not justified to unholster at all. I mean, that's just the way it is. I am not a lawyer, so again, this doesn't constitute legal advice, but I feel like this one's common sense. This is based on a lot of research into what constitutes it being okay. If you feel like you are not a person who could deal with the potential moral implication of having to take a life in self-defense, then you maybe need to reconsider your willingness to carry a weapon of deadly force for self-defense. I mean, Elias, jump in here and disagree with me anytime that you want to be devil's advocate, but
no, I mean, you have to, if you're going to carry, if you're going to have firearm, you have to be in a place mentally where you can use it, where you have to be ready to use it. You can't hesitate. If you hesitate, you're going to be dead.
In legal speak, as a self-defender, you are authorized to use deadly force when it is a reasonable response to a potentially deadly or life-altering threat, like severely life-altering. Like I think you're in legal speak, like if you were to be in a situation that would involve the loss of your eyesight, that justifies deadly force, as I recall.
There are some even that depends on the state, but for instance, Alaska or Texas, you are authorized to use it if you see a sexual assault happening, things like that. Like if you were to see a child being taken, you are actually justified in those as well. But that, again, that depends on state. Check with your state laws.
And once again, we are not lawyers, and we're more likely to speak of what our experience and understanding in the state of Indiana is. Anyway,
Right.
So once you are to the point where deadly force is a reasonable response to the situation, as a personal defender, you are to shoot to stop the threat. It's a very important legal definition. You are not licensed to kill. However, if they die in the process of you stopping the threat, you're justified, because it was reasonable for you to respond with deadly force. Okay, so I want to say that I don't disagree with Walker responding to armed intruders busting in with shots fired. I want to go on record as saying that he was wrong in not firing for effect. Scroll on down.
Sloppy.
Correct. It was just something that we all, if we carry a firearm, we need to keep in mind. You fire for effect, and you train to fire for effect. And ideally, you train in uncomfortable situations. Do you carry at church? Well, then perhaps you should, at the shooting range, train sitting in a chair and coming out of a holster. Because if you always and only train from the low ready on the flat range, and you're sitting in church and an incident happens like happened in White Settlement, Texas, you're not going to be trained to come out of your holster in a seated position. Do you carry in your car frequently? Have you trained to come out of your holster while restrained by a seatbelt? You have to train like you fight, and you have to be ready to fire for effect. Okay, secondly, scroll down here and find where evidently, because I'm not finding the place in this article, when police questioned Walker at the scene, he told the police that it was Breonna Taylor, the girlfriend, who had fired the shots, and not himself. And obviously it was a lie. And he said later, I did it because I was scared. Well, that's a problem. Number one, if there were any federal agents there, it's a federal offense to lie to a federal agent during the course of an investigation. So, automatically just making that another level of offense higher, potentially a worse level as far as the incarceration goes. So obviously, if you're going to answer questions asked of you, don't lie. But more importantly,
better yet,
go ahead and say it, because you're getting...
Don't
exactly.
answer. Yeah. Better yet, don't answer. The only thing you ever should say when a cop asks you anything, it doesn't matter how much you think you're right, and you may have been fully justified, your only response to a cop is, I want to talk to my lawyer.
Absolutely.
And that's it. I want my lawyer. Those are the only 4 words you ever say to a cop.
Absolutely.
I want my lawyer. And you don't talk until you have consulted with your lawyer.
If I were to have a situation in my locality where, once again, I'm on a first-name basis with a large portion of my county's sheriff's department, I might add just a few more words. I absolutely want to do my part to help with this investigation, but I will not answer any questions until I speak to my lawyer. You don't want to be like combative. You don't want to put yourself in a position where it looks like you are trying to impede an investigation, because that's a crime in its own right. But
asking for your lawyer is not impeding an investigation, period. That's your constitutional right. Here's the thing. This is going to be a generalization, but I think you'll find that there's a lot of truth within it. For the most part, they don't actually care about finding the truth. They care about closing a case.
Absolutely.
So if they can get you to say something that you think is helping yourself, but what you're actually doing is giving them enough ammo that they can go ahead and close that case, that's it. You're done. Doesn't matter how innocent you are. Doesn't matter how justified you are. They don't care either. Don't ever believe the cops when they tell you.
Right. Well,
they'll lie through their teeth to get something.
Here's a prime example. Expressing remorse at the scene. I'm sorry I had to shoot him. That will be presented to a jury that you felt like you might have had another choice. Now.
Yep, and they will tug at the heartstrings.
Would I legitimately and honestly be sorry that I was put in a position that I had to end the life of another human being? I think I would. But to express that casts a shadow of doubt on the fact that it was a reasonable use of force. So
that's why that's the only 4 words. I want my lawyer.
Brastard, sleep with a rifle, not a pistol. I kind of combine the two, and my bedside gun is a rifle pattern hand or pistol. Yeah, it's chambered in 300 blackout, as a matter of fact. And Randall, it's to not dig into it too greatly. With the Minnesota police officer, that is murder. Flat out, and needs to be prosecuted as such. And the other officers who stood around and did not say, dude, he's saying he can't breathe, get off him, we got him in cuffs, they are accessories to a homicide.
What really angers me is that if this country had gone the way it should have, what would have happened in that situation is all those bystanders would have all pulled guns, and you would have seen that knee come off that neck so fast. But as you know, to go back to what we said earlier, we've taken the path of least
Yeah.
resistance, and so now this is where we're at.
Randall, actually, I know that you're following me on Instagram. I shared a video response to my story by Officer Greg Anderson, and yeah, I would tell you the things he said that I disagreed with, except I didn't find any, and he spoke to it from the position of a police officer, although he is on administrative leave, and as a person who is trained in grappling and hand-to-hand combat and wrestling and being on the ground. And yeah, it's very good. You should.
There was no
No.
excuse. The guy was
Yeah.
already cuffed. There was no excuse whatsoever.
But definitely, when you get a chance after the stream's over, click through my Instagram story and listen to Greg Anderson's commentary on it. It's well spoken, well thought out, and 100% to the point. So, anyway, Elias and I discussed whether or not we wanted to deep dive into that, and since it's constitutional, it's life and liberty, but it's really pretty far removed from Second Amendment, and I know sometimes we get a little bit off the trail there.
And that's why I said if we had actually kept our country, if our country had actually kept up with their Second Amendment throughout the centuries, then we wouldn't have had that problem today. But that's a good example of why that was there. We just don't use it.
And once again, I mean, unfortunately, we keep seeing news stories of the tyrannical cops, of the ones who want to be jackbooted thugs. But I don't want to turn this stream and this series into just an anti-police.
Right.
We are anti-infringement. We are anti-tyranny. But for those who...
You can let my podcast do that. That's where I'll call everybody out.
There you go. But if you're wanting to chew on a law enforcement officer who deserves to be chewed on, and one that is directly related to Second Amendment and will just absolutely make your blood boil, you can go ahead and follow the link that I just dropped in the chat, and be prepared, if you haven't seen this, to be infuriated. So if you will go back in time with me, about 2.25 years, Valentine's Day 2018, there was a pretty big deal happened in Parkland, in the Parkland area of Florida, where a student shot up Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And I found out today that I actually misunderstood some of this, but there were 4 deputies who were terminated for a gross neglect of duty anyway, after that situation, in which 17 students and faculty members lost their lives. Now, I was under the impression that Brian Miller was the student resource officer on site at the time. And after reading the article I linked, I did discover I was mistaken in that. Miller was the first responding supervisor on the scene. And instead of going in to engage the shooter, he instead cowered behind his squad car and did not radio in a status update for 10 minutes. I've mentioned before that I work at the school where my own personal children attend. I make an effort to go out and interact with the students. Those students, though not biologically related, I consider to be my children. I cannot fathom the cowardice required to not stand in the gap to protect students against a psychopath. I can't do it. So, up to the point where the Broward County Sheriff's Department fired these 4 individuals, I was not okay with those individuals' response. I wasn't necessarily okay with the amount of time that it took to actually dismiss those individuals, which was over a year later in June of 2019. But I'm absolutely fine with those individuals losing their jobs. However, effective, what was the date on this? May 13th? Deputy Brian Miller, Sergeant Brian Miller, has been reinstated to the Broward County Sheriff's Department with full seniority and full back pay for the time that he was unemployed. I'm dismissing everything that I want to say because I try to keep this stream more or less family friendly. I mean, if you have friends or family or know anybody who lives in Broward County, Florida, they need to be expressing their dissatisfaction with this at a ballot box. I can't fathom what had to happen for the union to be able to pull these strings and get this individual reinstated.
Technicality.
I can't fathom.
Apparently the department has something like 180 days to notify that he's being terminated, and it was 2 days past that, and that's what the union used. So they did it on technicality. And what really, really irritates me is that you've got people in the union actually defending him instead of telling him, get lost. We're not going to help you with this.
So this goes back to, not only are you your own first responder, the police are a reporting organization. They are there to catalog the aftermath. There are men and women with a badge who absolutely are still willing to protect and serve. Absolutely. Okay, so I don't want you guys to think that I'm saying that gone are those days. What I'm telling you is, legally speaking, like as in from the highest courts of the land, the police have no responsibility to put their life on the line for you.
Correct.
They have no legal obligation.
And this is not just, and this is not just hyperbole. It actually is. The Supreme Court has ruled that police do not actually have a duty to protect the public.
Now, once again, we've discussed this before. They may not have a legal obligation but I fully believe they have a moral obligation. If you're a police officer and you happen to catch any part of the stream and you've either tuned in late or you've watched through till now, I'm just going to tell you straight up. If you don't have the moral fiber to be willing to live up to that motto, to protect and serve, find another job. You're a disgrace to the badge. You're a disgrace to hundreds of years of peacekeeping officers. If you're not willing to put your life on the line for a group of children, all right, if you find out that there's a gunfight at the gun range and you say, I'm not going to respond to that until the shooting's over, you know, I still think that's garbage, but at least it's armed individuals who maybe can do something for themselves. But when our legislators have turned our schools into barrels full of fish, by God, you have a responsibility to storm the gates. I don't care if it's one shooter or 15. I don't care if you have backup or not. When you have a shots fired at a school, you don't need to drive around to a different parking lot and put your plates on, because you should have put your plates on before you responded. And you go in hard and you pray before you go in, but if you don't go home to your family, you go to the gates of heaven knowing that you did the right thing.
Yeah.
There is no part of my person that can excuse this, that can accept this. The entire community needs to be in an outrage about this down in the Parkland area.
You know, it strikes back to have you ever seen Boondock Saints? One of the opening scene when the priest is giving a sermon about Kitty Genovese, who died while everybody was watching. You know, I don't understand how you can sit there, especially when you're in that position. You're in a position to do something about it, and you just go and you hide behind a car. You have plates. You have a firearm. I'm not saying you need to run in there guns blazing right in the middle of the hallway, but you've had some training. You should be able to get in there, see what's going on, and radio back.
Well, or here you go. You know, we've talked about the militarization of the police. Man, you want to be a paramilitary organization? Then you go in exactly the way that they would go in Fallujah. I mean, if that's what you want, then do it. Own it. Okay, I have no respect for the student resource officer who ran out. Okay, but I have less respect for somebody who is responding and has all of the resources in their squad car, plates and a rifle.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even thought about the fact that more likely than not, he's got a rifle in the car
right.
also.
You know, the resource officer, I'm going to guess, had nothing but his pistol on his hip. And I can understand not wanting to get in a gunfight against a guy with a rifle with a handgun. That's less than ideal. I mean, I still think it's your freaking job. You know, you take the job as a student resource officer, then you need to be willing to do the job. I think it's in the job description, respond to threats against the student body, but yeah, I just...
He responded by hiding behind his car.
And not radioing in a status update. That...
And for the union to help him based on a technicality, that's the other thing that gets me about it is...
I feel like there's a...
The police department had to legally do it. They had no choice from a legal standpoint. Why is the union sticking up for this guy?
Yeah.
The union should have told him to take a hike. Go be a mall cop somewhere.
I wouldn't trust him with a stun gun and a Segway in a mall, but that's just me. All right, well, now that I'm suitably furious.
Anyway,
right.
Yeah.
I think everybody has
On that note.
looks like everybody has bailed on the stream.
Blair got angry and everybody ran.
Well, guys, I do appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Once again, if you see news that you want to make sure that you know that I've seen, you can feel free to send that to me either through my email address, which you can find in the About page of my YouTube channel, or you can hit me up over on social media. That's Tactical Review 2019 on both Facebook and Instagram. Because even big news does sometime not catch my radar. Somehow, until Elias said something to me about it, I completely missed that shooting at Corpus Christi. So I feel like, I don't know how that's not bigger news than it is. It's the second shooting at a naval base within a year. I mean, that by itself is indicative of a problem, but it kind of fell through the cracks for me. So, like I said, feel free to reach out to me on social media. Go ahead and follow me there. That's why I'm set up on those sources. If you feel like you'd like to help out the channel, you can do that directly over on Patreon. And once again, I do need to get set up on Subscribestar. I haven't done that yet, but you can subscribe over on Patreon. I do try to give my patrons early access to my videos. And, you know, that gives you guys another direct method of contacting me. If you would like to help out, but aren't in a position to do a kind of monthly subscription type thing, you can head over to the Teespring store and pick yourself up some t-shirts, and the channel does get a couple dollars off of every t-shirt sale that we have. I appreciate those of you guys who have done that. I do have a little bit of support built up over there, so I really appreciate that. If you guys haven't yet, I would certainly appreciate a thumbs up on the stream. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, maybe it's your first time joining us, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And it definitely helps with the algorithms on the YouTube platform that hates gun channels. If you guys will interact, leave some comments, share the videos, and we've got some more stuff coming up. Really excited. Current plan is that Elias and I are going to actually get together out on the range this coming weekend, and so hopefully we will end up with a few videos that come from that, as well as burning some gunpowder, because that's always a good time. Oh, Elias, tell the people at home how they can follow the Liberty Review podcast.
I don't know. Let's see, Liberty Review 1776.com, on Facebook at Liberty Review 1776, and on the YouTube channel. I am finishing up putting on together the next episode, where we'll talk about all kinds of fun things like the Communications Decency Act and FISA and the Patriot Act and states threatening to close churches with firearms.
Awesome.
All sorts of fun things. We got a senator in Florida that said that he really doesn't care what a governor says or what the president says or what anybody says. He's going to church. We got lockdowns being overturned in several states. All kinds of fun things going on. So
awesome.
Hopefully have that out here.
Well, excellent. So all you guys need to make sure that you are following Elias on. Let's be realistic. You should probably be following all of your pro-Constitution, pro-2A creators on at least 2 of the platforms that they use. So make sure you guys can also follow me on either BitChute or Gunstreamer. Gunstreamer pulls all of my new videos automatically. BitChute I have to upload manually about 90% of the time. and usually it takes me about 4 tries to get a video to upload and process. So BitChute is probably the most open platform that I use, but it's also the least user-friendly. Fair warning. But if they ever get live streaming set up, we'll be multicasting there too. If you guys have anything else to throw in the chat, make sure you do that. There are several other content creators who were watching tonight. I'm going to miss some, but I know Poor Conservative, Pale Horse. I know Vanessa Kitty has an Instagram. I'm not sure if she does anything on YouTube. Warsaw Patriot, Brastard762. So definitely make sure, click each other's usernames in the chat and check out. And if they are uploading videos, make sure that we follow each other. We're supposed to be a community, and we have to build each other up, or we're all going to be deplatformed and have no place to go. So, guys, now that my blood pressure has come down once again, I really support you guys, or support. No, it is late. I don't know where my brain is. I appreciate you guys joining the stream tonight. And until next time, remember, shoot straight and stay safe.